In the heart of a sleepy coastal town, where the stars seemed close enough to touch, strange lights danced across the midnight sky. It wasn't the typical shooting star that caught Mr. Chen's attention that fateful night. It was something far more extraordinary. The 72-year-old retired astronomer had spent countless evenings on his weathered porch, telescope in hand, but nothing could have prepared him for what crashed into his overgrown backyard garden. Steam rose from a small silvery pod no bigger than a mini fridge, its metallic surface gleaming under the moonlight. As Mr. Chen cautiously approached, his weathered hands trembling with both excitement and fear, he heard something that made his heart skip, a soft whimper, almost like a child's cry. Inside the pod, curled up in what looked like strings of starlight, was a small figure that would change his life forever. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, with iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer like the northern lights. Her large, almond-shaped eyes reflected the cosmos itself, but they were filled with tears and an unmistakable look of hunger and exhaustion. Mr. Chen, who had lived alone since losing his wife 5 years ago, didn't hesitate. Despite her otherworldly appearance, all he saw was a frightened child who needed help. But when he tried to approach, she shrank back, her skin flickering like a failing light bulb. The universal language of fear and loneliness needed no translation. Hours turned into days as Mr. Chen left food near the pod, watching from his kitchen window as the little visitor cautiously emerged only when she thought no one was looking. She survived on nothing but water and light, quite literally absorbing sunlight through her translucent skin. Yet she was growing weaker by the day. The old astronomer knew he had to gain her trust before it was too late. Each night he would sit on his porch and tell stories about the stars, pointing out constellations with his laser pointer. Sometimes he caught glimpses of her watching from behind the garden bushes, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. One particularly cold night, when the autumn wind whistled through the trees, Mr. Chen found her collapsed beside the pod, her skin barely glowing. Without thinking twice, he scooped up the feather-light child and rushed her inside. To his surprise, she didn't resist. Perhaps she had finally realized that not all inhabitants of this strange planet meant her harm. The weeks that followed were filled with discovery and challenges. Mr. Chen learned that traditional food made her ill, but she thrived on a diet of sunlight and a curious blue substance from her pod. He converted his greenhouse into a sleeping chamber, filling it with special lights that seemed to strengthen her. Slowly but surely, color returned to her ethereal features. Nobody in town questioned the sudden appearance of Mr. Chen's granddaughter. Perhaps they weren't ready to see what was right in front of them, or maybe they simply chose not to. But for the old astronomer, life had gained new purpose. His quiet evenings were now filled with teaching her about Earth's wonders and learning about her own mysterious origins through a combination of gestures, drawings, and the universal language of care. But just as their unusual family was finding its rhythm, strange signals began appearing on Mr. Chen's old radio equipment, the same kind of signals he detected the night she arrived. As the little alien's eyes grew wide with recognition at the sounds, Mr. Chen felt his heart sink. Was someone looking for her? And if they found her, would they try to take away the child who had become the daughter he never had? The radio signals grew stronger with each passing day, their rhythmic pulses becoming more frequent during the night hours. Mr. Chen spent his evenings hunched over his old equipment, trying to decipher the mysterious patterns while his young companion watched with an unreadable expression. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, she would press her tiny hand against the radio's speaker, her skin pulsing in sync with the strange frequencies. Through their time together, Mr. Chen had learned more about his extraordinary ward. She communicated through a combination of light patterns that danced across her skin and simple drawings. From what he could understand, she had been part of a research mission gone wrong. Her people, advanced beings who traveled through space studying different civilizations, had encountered some kind of disaster. The escape pod had been a last resort, programmed to find the nearest habitable planet. The little one's drawings often showed a larger ship surrounded by what looked like lightning bolts or some kind of energy discharge. There were other figures too, similar to her but larger, their faces always drawn with sad expressions. Mr. Chen's heart ached every time she drew these pictures. understanding the profound loss hidden within those simple crayon lines. As winter approached, Mr. Chen noticed something remarkable. The child was adapting to Earth's environment in unexpected ways. Her need for the blue substance from the pod had decreased, and she had started showing interest in simple human foods like fruit and vegetables. Her skin, while still iridescent, had developed a more human-like opacity, making it easier for her to venture outside without drawing attention. The local townspeople had grown used to seeing them together at the small grocery store or walking along the beach at sunset. They smiled at what they assumed was a grandfather doting on his peculiar but adorable granddaughter. Mrs. Lee, who ran the local library, would wave to them during their weekly visits, never questioning why the child only borrowed books about space and science. But their peaceful routine was about to be disrupted. One evening, while they were stargazing from the greenhouse, the little one suddenly grabbed Mr. Chen's arm. Her skin flickered rapidly, creating patterns he'd never seen before. She pointed urgently at a particular section of the sky, just as his radio equipment burst to life with a series of intense signals. Through the telescope, Mr. Chen spotted something that made his blood run cold, a formation of lights moving in a distinctly artificial pattern. They were too controlled to be shooting stars, too precise to be satellites. Whatever, or whoever, was up there seemed to be searching for something. The child's reaction confirmed his fears. She began gathering her few possessions, the remaining blue substance, her drawings, and a small crystal that she always wore around her neck. Her movements were hurried but hesitant, torn between the instinct to flee and her obvious attachment to the place and person she now called home. Mr. Chen faced an impossible decision. The signals could be from her people, coming to rescue her and take her back to her own kind. Or they could be something else entirely, perhaps whatever force had caused her ship's destruction in the first place. His scientific mind warred with his protective instincts as he watched her prepare for what might be coming. Outside, the wind picked up, and clouds began gathering unusually quickly. The little one's skin pulsed with a warning glow he'd never seen before. As they stood in the greenhouse, holding hands and watching the sky, Mr. Chen realized that the next few hours would determine not just their future, but possibly the nature of humanity's first real contact with beings from beyond our world. The mysterious lights in the sky grew larger and more intense, casting eerie shadows across Mr. Chen's property. His young companion's skin flickered with rapid pulses of light, her usual soft glow now a frantic display of colors he'd never seen before. She clutched her crystal necklace tightly, its surface beginning to emit a faint hum that matched the frequencies coming from his radio equipment. Thunder rolled across the sky, but there wasn't a natural cloud in sight. The strange formation of lights had created their own weather system, swirling dark masses that crackled with energy. Mr. Chen's scientific mind recognized that whatever technology was at work up there, it was far beyond anything humanity had achieved. In a moment of clarity, he realized what he had to do. Racing to his basement, Mr. Chen retrieved an old metal box his wife had once used for important documents. Inside, he carefully placed all of the little one's drawings, samples of the blue substance he'd been studying, and his detailed notes about her arrival and abilities. If anything happened, at least there would be a record, a testament to the extraordinary bond between an elderly astronomer and a child from the stars. The little one followed him, her eyes wide with understanding. She added her own contribution to the box, a single perfect crystal, smaller than the one around her neck, that she'd been keeping hidden in her pod. When Mr. Chen looked confused, she created images with her light patterns that seemed to suggest it was some kind of key or record of her people's knowledge. Suddenly, the radio erupted with a deafening series of signals that made both of them cover their ears. The little one's skin went completely pale, and for the first time since her arrival, she spoke not in words, but in a melodic series of tones that seemed to resonate with the crystal around her neck. The ground beneath them began to vibrate, and Mr. Chen's astronomical equipment started registering readings off the charts. Whatever was up there had begun its descent, and they were directly in its path. Through the basement window, they could see multiple beams of light scanning the area, getting closer to their location with each sweep. Making a split-second decision, Mr. Chen grabbed his late wife's old Polaroid camera and quickly took several photos of his alien child, adding them to the metal box before sealing it and hiding it behind a loose brick in the basement wall. If anyone came looking for evidence later, they would find it. The little one tugged at his sleeve urgently, pointing upward. Her skin patterns had changed to show what looked like a warning sign, the same pattern she'd drawn when trying to explain what had happened to her ship. Mr. Chen's heart raced as he realized the implications. Whatever was coming down might not be friendly at all. They rushed back upstairs just as a blinding light flooded through every window of the house. The little one's crystal necklace began pulsing with an intensity that lit up the entire room. She looked at Mr. Chen with an expression that contained both fear and determination, her small hand gripping his tightly as multiple shadows appeared on the other side of the front door. The doorknob began to turn, moving in slow motion as the air itself seemed to crackle with electricity. Mr. Chen stood protectively in front of his adopted daughter, knowing that the next few moments would change both their lives forever. The door swung open, revealing silhouettes that were decidedly not human, their forms obscured by the brilliant light behind them. The little one's crystal necklace reached a fever pitch of light and sound, responding to whatever, or whoever, stood in the doorway. In that moment, frozen in time between one heartbeat and the next, Mr. Chen realized that everything he knew about the universe, about family, about love itself, was about to be challenged in ways he could never have imagined. The figures in the doorway stepped into the light, revealing forms that seemed to shift between solid and ethereal. There were 3 of them, each bearing a striking resemblance to Mr. Chen's little one, but with markings that glowed in deep crimson rather than her gentle azure patterns. Their presence filled the room with an electric tension that made every hair on Mr. Chen's neck stand on end. But before anyone could move or speak, something unexpected happened. The little one's crystal necklace suddenly projected a holographic message, a recording of what appeared to be her parents. The images showed them frantically preparing the escape pod, but what caught Mr. Chen's attention wasn't the chaos of the moment. It was the uniform worn by one of the adults. It matched exactly what the beings in his doorway were wearing, yet in the recording, her parents were clearly trying to hide from someone wearing those same uniforms. The little one's reaction confirmed his suspicion. She wasn't cowering in fear. She was positioning herself between the visitors and her adoptive father, her tiny form radiating a protective energy he'd never seen before. The crystal around her neck pulsed with increasing intensity, creating a barrier of light that separated them from the intruders. Just then, Mr. Chen's old radio equipment crackled to life with a different signal, this one somehow familiar, matching the frequency he detected on the night she first arrived. The little one's eyes widened in recognition, and her skin patterns shifted to match the new signal's rhythm. Through the window, they could see another light approaching, this one softer, more organic in its movement. The 3 figures turned sharply toward the new signal, their crimson markings flashing in what appeared to be alarm. They raised their arms, revealing devices that looked like they were grown rather than manufactured. But before they could use them, the little one's crystal exploded with light, filling the room with a cascade of images, memories of her time on Earth, of the love and care she'd received from Mr. Chen, of the home they'd built together. The impact of these projected memories seemed to physically stagger the intruders, their forms flickering like candles in a strong wind. Mr. Chen noticed something odd. Where the memories touched them, their crimson markings began to fade, revealing patches of natural iridescence underneath, as if some kind of disguise was being stripped away. Outside, the new light drew closer, taking shape through the swirling atmospheric disturbance. But what made Mr. Chen gasp wasn't its appearance. It was the fact that he recognized it, the pattern of lights, the specific frequency of the signal. They exactly matched the annotations in his wife's old research journals, the ones he discovered after her passing, the ones that had convinced him she'd been more than just an amateur astronomer. The little one's skin patterns suddenly shifted to show a series of symbols he'd seen before, not in her drawings, but in his wife's private notes. As understanding dawned, Mr. Chen felt the weight of an even greater mystery pressing in around them. His wife hadn't just been studying the stars. She'd been preparing for this moment, leaving behind clues that only now began to make sense. The 3 figures started moving backward, their disguises continuing to fade, revealing expressions not of menace, but of desperation. The little one's crystal pulsed one final time, and in that burst of light, Mr. Chen caught a glimpse of something in their eyes, not the cold calculation of pursuers, but the terror of those also running from something else, something that now seemed to be approaching from above, casting a shadow that began to blot out the stars themselves. As the massive shadow descended from above, the truth unfolded like a cosmic flower. The three figures weren't pursuers at all. They were refugees, just like the little one, wearing disguises to hide from the real threat that now loomed over them. Their crimson markings completely faded, revealing the same shimmering skin as Mr. Chen's adopted daughter. They were her people, running from the same darkness that had separated her from her parents. The approaching light that matched his wife's research grew brighter, and suddenly a familiar voice filled the room, not through the radio, but directly in their minds. "My dear," it said, and Mr. Chen nearly collapsed as he recognized his wife's gentle tone. "I'm sorry I had to leave before I could explain everything, but I knew someone would come, someone who needed our help." The holographic message from his wife revealed that she had been part of a secret network of human guardians, working for decades to help refugee aliens escape from an ancient cosmic entity that consumed worlds and civilizations. The little one's parents hadn't just randomly sent her to Earth. They'd specifically sought out the home of a guardian's widow, knowing the location would be safely hidden from their pursuer. The crystal necklace wasn't just a communication device, it was a key to activating Earth's ancient defense network, a system his wife and others had helped maintain in secret. The little one's presence, her bond with Mr. Chen, and the arrival of the three refugees had created the perfect combination to finally activate it. As the dark mass above tried to breach the atmosphere, thousands of points of light suddenly sparked to life around the globe, hidden beacons placed by generations of guardians, all connecting through the power of the crystal. The little one's skin glowed brighter than ever as she joined hands with the three refugees, their combined energy channeling through the crystal network. Mr. Chen watched in awe as his greenhouse, the place where he had nurtured and protected his alien child, transformed into something extraordinary. The plants began to glow with the same iridescent light as their skin, revealing themselves as part of the defensive technology his wife had carefully cultivated. Even his old radio equipment sparked to life, joining the symphony of light and energy. The dark entity above recoiled as the combined power of the crystal network shot skyward, creating a protective barrier around Earth. The little one's crystal projected one final message from her parents. They were alive, hidden safely on another world, waiting for the right moment to reunite. They had sent their daughter to Earth not just for protection, but because they knew she would be the key to activating humanity's ancient role as guardians of galactic refugees. As the dark entity retreated into the depths of space, the three refugees shared their own story through light patterns. They were scouts, sent ahead by a larger group of survivors seeking sanctuary. Earth would become a beacon of hope, a safe haven for those fleeing cosmic dangers, all thanks to the pure bond between an elderly astronomer and an orphaned alien child. But just as victory seemed complete, Mr. Chen noticed something peculiar in his wife's final recorded message. Behind her stood a star chart showing a constellation that didn't exist yet in her time, one that would only form centuries in the future. As he looked at his adopted daughter, her knowing smile suggested that the greatest mystery of all was still unfolding. Perhaps his wife's role in this cosmic plan reached far beyond her own lifetime, and their story was just beginning. The little one took his hand, her skin glowing with a pattern that spelled out a simple message: "We are home." Above them, the stars twinkled with new meaning, promising not an end to their adventure, but a spectacular new chapter in the story of Earth's role as a sanctuary among the stars. In the weeks that followed, Mr. Chen's modest coastal home transformed into something extraordinary. The greenhouse, now revealed as an alien sanctuary, bloomed with plants that glowed softly at night, providing sustenance for their new refugee guests. The three visitors, no longer hiding behind their crimson disguises, helped expand the hidden technology throughout the property, preparing for others who would eventually seek shelter. The little one, who finally shared her name through a pattern of lights that translated roughly to Star Dancer, flourished in her role as a bridge between two worlds, she taught Mr. Chen and the refugees how to maintain the crystal network, while they taught her about Earth's cultures and traditions. Her ability to look human had grown so natural that she started attending the local school, excelling particularly in science and art, where she could share her unique perspective of the cosmos without raising suspicion. More pieces of Mr. Chen's wife's involvement unveiled themselves as they decoded her old journals. She had been part of a lineage of guardians stretching back centuries, each generation preparing Earth for its destiny as a cosmic sanctuary. The strange future constellation in her star chart wasn't an error. It was a message, suggesting that the network of guardians extended not just across space, but through time itself. The radio equipment in Mr. Chen's study became a beacon for others seeking refuge, its signals now clear and purposeful rather than mysterious. Each evening, Star Dancer would sit with her adopted father, teaching him the language of light patterns that her people used to communicate. Together, they documented their story, adding to the chronicles of Earth's guardian history that his wife had maintained before him. Local townspeople, while unaware of the full truth, sensed something special about Mr. Chen's expanded family. Mrs. Lee from the library donated books about different cultures and languages, unknowingly helping the refugees better understand their new home. The community's acceptance, even without full understanding, proved that humanity was ready for its role as cosmic protectors. One quiet evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Star Dancer showed Mr. Chen a new pattern she'd been practicing. It was a complex sequence that, when translated, revealed the coordinates where her biological parents were hidden. But instead of the sadness he expected, she explained through light patterns that she now had something even more precious: two families bound together by love that transcended the boundaries of space and species. The constellation from his wife's star chart began appearing more frequently in Star Dancer's drawings, along with symbols that suggested a greater purpose yet to be revealed. Mr. Chen realized that their story wasn't just about finding a home or saving refugees. It was about humanity's first steps into a larger community of cosmic citizens, guided by the wisdom of those who had learned to look beyond appearances to see the light within. As autumn turned to winter again, their household settled into a new normal. The metal box of evidence remained safely hidden in the basement, no longer needed as proof but preserved as a testament to how love and trust could bridge the gap between worlds. Star Dancer's crystal necklace, now joined by a network of similar crystals around the globe, continued to protect Earth from dark forces that roamed the cosmos. Mr. Chen, no longer the lonely widower who once watched the stars in solitude, found himself at the heart of an extraordinary family. As he watched Star Dancer teaching the younger refugees about Earth's constellations, using the same telescope he'd once used alone, he smiled knowing that his wife had been right all along. Sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't found in the stars above, but in the connections we make with those who journey alongside us, no matter how far they've traveled to find their way home.